You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast, where we cover all things related to vertebrate pest management from a technical and research-based perspective. Hey, glad to have you on board. I hope your week went well. As I said last time, my life's gotten pretty complicated, and I'm coming up to another training season here, so I'll be traveling some more, so I'm trying to get some podcasts put together so I don't break the Friday publication time, so just so that you're aware of that. Hope you're doing well, and we'd love to hear from you. You could reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, where you can tell me about suggestions you have for new shows. Perhaps you have a guest that we would like to have. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, if you have perhaps even complaints, you can reach me about that as well. All right, enough about that. Just a reminder about my website. We have the wildlifecontrolconsultant.com store, where we have a variety of materials available for you to improve your training. These are manuals and books designed for training you to handle wildlife control like a professional. So I just wanted to highlight one of my early books, the Wildlife Removal Handbook. It's in its third edition, and so it covers a lot of your big money-making animals, squirrels, raccoons, skunks, that sort of thing. And it will cover a variety of ways, giving you detailed information on how to respond to those particular animals, including how to inspect the building and that sort of thing. So the reason why I mentioned it, because as I said last week, I was going to give a review of the Vertebrate Pest chapter of, let me hold it up here for you, the 11th edition of the Mallis Handbook of Pest Control. So if you're not familiar with this book, if you didn't see last week's podcast, this thing is the Bible, basically, of pest control. It basically kind of gives you a broad overview of the control methods and pests that are common in the structural pest industry. Of course, it's dominated by insects, but it has a couple of chapters that deal with vertebrate pests. I've already discussed the rats and mice one by Dr. Corrigan last week, and I said that chapter alone was worth the cost of the book. So this week, I'm reviewing the second vertebrate chapter, and this one's on vertebrate pests. Of course, it covers everything else other than rats and mice, and so we're going to talk about that this week. But this book is huge. If you have the 10th edition, this one is probably, if I had to guess, at least a quarter of the size more, because they expanded the size of the book and went to an 8.5 by 11 volume rather than the, I think, 6 by 8 or maybe 8 by 10. Maybe it was 8 by 10 before. But this thing is absolutely huge. It must weigh like 8 pounds or something. It is absolutely massive. But wanted to just sort of mention about this particular book because I think it's valuable, especially if you do insect work, which I would encourage many of you, if you're not doing insect work, at least get licensed in pest control as quickly as you can, because it offers up another revenue stream for you, because wildlife control can be, depending where you live, it can be a bit iffy at times, and more pest control companies are moving into wildlife, so you may find that they're going to pick up the easy jobs. They're not going to get involved into, either they're going to get into really high-end jobs, like maybe major bird work, or they're going to take out the easy jobs, or both, leaving you with just the middlings, and so that can be hard for you to expand your business, but that's the subject for another podcast. So why don't I get started talking about this particular chapter. So it's chapter 17. Let me kind of hold it up here for you so you can see it. There it is, Chapter 17, and the author is Scott McNeely, and according to his biography, he's a second-generation PCO based in, I believe it's in the Carolinas, yeah, somewhere around there. Seems like that's the case where he's at, and of course he has his degree in entomology. So one of my pet peeves, of course, is vertebrate folks aren't supposed to deal with insects, but insect folks can deal with vertebrates, right? So this is part of the challenge in the vertebrate control world, is we don't get the respect, in my opinion, that we should. And no disrespect to Mr. McNeely, but the fact of the matter is that it is a specialty, and there is a level of expertise that is required. It shouldn't just be something that is an add-on, or at least if someone's writing about it, it shouldn't be an add-on, right? And so, I mean, when you look at Dr. Corrigan, he specializes in rodentology, right? As he's kind of a neologism that he's created, but he is the rat man, right? Without a doubt. So it's discouraging to have a chapter written by someone who isn't a specialist in or is severely dedicated to the field of vertebrate pest control. And I think the challenge here for this chapter, and it's a difficult chapter to write, I want to definitely mention that. So as you can tell, I'm a bit critical of this chapter. I don't think that it did the manual as well as it could have, but I want to put some caveats in there. I want to be generous, right? Because I don't know what his page restriction was, right? And so you can't always blame someone for not covering certain things if he was not given the space to cover certain things. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think he could have done better with the space that he has. I think he could have. I would have probably organized it a little bit differently. But nevertheless, we have to temper, or at least I'm going to temper some of my criticism by recognizing that it's such a broad area, and I don't know how much space he had. But just to kind of give you an illustration about how many pages he only had pages between 952, and I'm including his bio, to page 1003. So you're looking at about 50 pages is all that he had. And that's not a lot for all the species that he had to deal with, right? So, and also, another comment I'm going to make, if you look at last week's video where I talked about how many pages Dr. Corrigan had on his bibliography, the bibliography in this chapter lists only 4 sources. Now, Dr. Corrigan's chapter on rats and mice, I think he had 20 pages just in bibliography. This one has only, and I'm not talking 4 pages, I'm saying there's 4 entries. Only 4 publications are listed. Not 20 pages worth. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 documents that he cited here. So I'm shocked, actually, right? So that's just amazing to me. And some of them, the most recent one that he cites is 1984. Everything else is older than that. And now there has been a wealth of research that's been done since 1984. The oldest is 1979. The next oldest after that is 1968. And the next one is 1964. And that's it. That's all he lists. So that, of course, is a concern for me. But before we get going too much farther into that, let me go through his outline of the chapter highlights, just like I did for Dr. Corrigan. So let me list those for you here. He has wildlife control options, basic wildlife control equipment, rodents and rabbits, woodchucks and marmots, porcupines, beavers, muskrats, and nutria, traps and trapping devices, squirrels and chipmunks, cotton rats, wood rats and meadow voles, cottontail rabbits, raccoons and skunks, opossums, coyotes and foxes, armadillos, moles, bats, nuisance birds, venomous and non-venomous snakes. So That's quite a diverse, that's a lot to cover, okay? So just to kind of illustrate, in my book here, my book that I'm listing here at the Wildlife Removal Handbook, I think that's about 130, 140 pages. It's like a 6x8 size, and I only cover tree squirrels, I believe I have moles, I believe possums, raccoons, skunks, woodchucks, and so that's only basically seven species, although tree squirrels obviously covers more than that, like four different species. But nevertheless, much more in depth, right? But he doesn't have anything in here on the inspection of a structure for vertebrate pests. But again, I don't know if he was given the space with only 50 pages. It's basically like half, if memory serves, of what Dr. Corrigan had for just commensal rodents, which is roof rats, Norway rats, and house mice. So I don't know what his, so in fair, I want to try to be fair to him, right? So he does have some helpful, I guess, charts or tables that can be useful for people, particularly if you don't know anything about wildlife control and are looking to start. Then this is a good chapter for you to begin with, because he covers a lot of the really fundamental information. Now, I don't think it's going to be enough for you to get going, but at least it's going to give you the lay of the land when it comes to vertebrate pest control. And so he has things. Here's one on basic wildlife control equipment. They have a key to help you identify certain types of ground squirrels and rodents. He has another table here on basic biology of rodents and rabbits, and that can be helpful. It's basically just telling you how many litters they have, how large the litters are, when are they mating, that sort of thing. And then he talks about some of the cage trapping devices. This is another table, and he talks about cage traps, which I appreciate. I'm glad he at least used cage traps. I have a pet peeve, as you know, about live traps, although he uses that term far too much, in my opinion. He does talk about cage traps and foothold traps. He uses the right word there. And then cable restraints. Kudos for that. A lot of people keep calling them snares. And because snares and cable restraints, snares are designed to kill, cable restraints are designed to just hold. And then body gripping traps. So that's fair. He does mention the issues of smoke cartridges and fumigants. I would have liked a little section on law. Particularly because some pest control operators don't think they need to have a wildlife control license, and they just think that their pest control license gives them the right to control wildlife. Now, it may, because they may be dealing with species that aren't regulated in their states, but other states like Massachusetts, for example, if you're doing wildlife, you have to have a problem animal control permit, even if you have a pest control license, right? Because the pest control license only covers pesticides, doesn't allow you to use that pesticide on an animal without the wildlife agency. So I think that would have been nice to sort of tease that out a little bit. He has another table using different trapping devices recommendations for specific species of animals, which I think could be helpful for people. I'm not sure it's the best use of space given how much space he doesn't have in this thing. I don't know, because it can get a little repetitive, especially when you start seeing a lot of non-applicables in there. I'm not sure how valuable that is. He talks about propane oxygen exploders. He calls them explosive combustion, which is kind of a interesting way of phrasing it. Some of the line drawings, it has a mixture of line drawings in black and white photos. I think at times it would have been better to spend less time on showing you the picture of a squirrel rather than maybe a picture of a set. A trapping set would have been maybe more helpful to illustrate, to help people understand how to use some of these traps. He goes on, of course, talks about wood rats and cottontail rabbits and possums. Now, here's a couple of things I wanted to point out. He mentions in some of the equipment, Syringe poles, which is fine. He talks about mentions briefly the use of acetone to control skunks. And then he delves into some bats, but doesn't, and he mentions white nose syndrome as affecting bats, which is certainly true, but doesn't mention anything about the importance or concern over are pest control professionals who are doing bat work, are they possibly transmitting the fungus from building to building if they're not cleaning their equipment between inspections or cleaning their equipment in between services of doing bat control services at different buildings? Doesn't mention that, which was certainly a concern. On page 980, he talks about euthanasia. I would have liked to have a little bit more detail on euthanasia and carcass disposal. But when he does mention about the euthanasia chamber, he says airtight. You don't want an airtight euthanasia chamber. It needs to be airtight on the bottom and sides, but not the top. It needs to have a way for the carbon dioxide to go into the chamber, and then there needs to be a blow-off that allows the room air to be pushed out of the chamber and replaced by the incoming carbon dioxide. Otherwise, you're going to increase the pressure and, basically make the animal feel like it's going under heavy pressure of some sort of thing. But all you're doing is you're removing the room air and replacing it with the carbon dioxide. So that was a little bit of a mistake there. He doesn't talk about concern like the interview that may be necessary with someone who has a bat in their living space, whether there is a possible exposure to rabies. Now, granted, he can't cover everything, and we want to just remind people he can't cover everything. But when you're looking at the concerns of people that might have been exposed to a bat and not know it, especially if that bat could be rabid, then it becomes a business-ending event, and that was certainly a concern. Kudos to him when he's talking about PPE. He talks about some diseases that people can be exposed to doing wildlife control. Kudos to him for that. He has another chart, of course, on the biology of common structure infesting bats. That could be useful for people as sort of a thumbnail place to get a lot of that information. He then spends a lot of time in his chapters, a lot of space on repellents and frightening devices like harassment. And those of us in the wildlife control industry know that those things really just consume a lot of time, and their efficacy is often questionable. So I'm not sure why so much energy, how much space was put into those, especially when it would have been really helpful to explore some of those other techniques. For example, he also talks about shooting at times, but yet how often in an urbanized area is shooting really an option for you, especially the way Americans are so concerned about firearms and this sort of thing. So it just caught me off guard, because he talks about propane oxygen exploders as not to be used in areas around buildings, but the same thing can be said about shooting unless you have all the permits, and then of course the safety concerns involved with shooting. So wouldn't it have been? It just seemed to be a little uneven about the control elements on that. So I think that if you're brand new to the area of vertebrate pest control, this chapter can give you a foundation to help you build further. But if you're looking to sort of like, all right, I need to know how to handle this particular pest in a competent manner, I think it has a lot to be desired in that regard. It needed to at least give you perhaps one species with enough detail, then say, all right, this is going to be our model for handling other things, right? When you talk about euthanasia, if you had a full-on section on euthanasia, then people can then say, all right, if I'm handling a different species, I need to think about it this way, handling it this way. So I'm not exactly sure that it really met the goal there. So would I buy the book just for that particular chapter? The answer is no, I would not. However, you're getting more than that. You're getting Dr. Corrigan's chapter, of course, on rats and mice, which is, that alone is worth the book. So if you're looking for some things, there are a couple of ideas in here that were kind of new to me, and so I want to give credit for that. There is, it's often helpful to see things from a different perspective. And so that can be helpful for you. But if you're looking to build your business on it, this is a starting point. I would call this the first and second step. But you need to go for a few more steps before you get to the place where you really want to feel comfortable moving in the control area. That's unfortunate, because I do think that vertebrate pest control is one of the growth areas in the pest control field, and there has been a tremendous amount of development and techniques and equipment in the wildlife control field that would have been nice to have spotlighted in this manual, because this is such an impactful manual for the industry. And I think it kind of missed an opportunity there that could have been exploited. So where do you get your copy if you're interested in picking it up? Well, you can just go to the Pest Control's Technology store. As you can see, it's not cheap. It's listed here at $200 a copy. I don't know if that is postpaid. When I bought mine, I got it on the special, where it was about, I think, $175, $79 postpaid. That was around Thanksgiving time is when you ordered it, and of course I received it in December. So that was sort of like a pre-publication deal that they had, and so I'm glad I got that, because it is pricey. And I even looked at, you say, well, maybe I can buy the earlier version, and the earlier version is well worth owning. I haven't looked at the vertebrate chapter recently, but certainly for Dr. Corrigan's chapter, it's well worth it. But understand, it is older. These come out about every 10 years or so. So you may need to, but I looked at the prices, and their prices are awful high. I looked at Amazon. I only looked at Amazon. There may be able to find it somewhere else cheaper, but if you're going to spend $200, you might as well get the latest edition. And again, this is a major expansion. So if you do traditional pest control, you want to get a copy of this. So without a doubt. But if you're just invertebrates, get it for your rats and mice. And then you get a little bump with the Vertebrate Pest chapter. So maybe you'll explore getting into pest control as well. Well, that's it for me on this particular week. So again, you can go to Pest Control Technology Store to purchase the product, and you can buy it online there. So it's PCT online, or just look up Mallis Handbook of Pest Control. 11th edition is the one that you'd want, published in 2025, right? It was at the end of the year. Well, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to the Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast, where we've been reviewing the 11th edition of the Mallis Handbook of Pest Control, Chapter 17, on vertebrate pests. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you're looking to learn about about Dr. Corrigan's chapter, that's the previous podcast that I did. So just go back a week and pick up that one, and get a little bit of insight on what my thoughts are on Dr. Corrigan's chapter. So, but that's basically it. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions for new shows, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. And then don't forget, if you have interest in purchasing some training materials, perhaps you'd like me to speak and train at your particular company, or do some ghostwriting for you, or some research, you can reach me out to reach me again at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right. Well, that's it for this week. I hope everyone has a good coming week and weekend. Until next time, take care, everyone. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.